Their child invisible to the world finds shelter in the most unlikely place, and with a simple gesture, changes forever the life of a family on the verge of collapse. On top of one of the most elegant hills in Portland, where the scent of maple trees mingled with the cool evening breeze of Oregon, stood the Wilson Mansion. It was an imposing construction, with its neoclassical pillars and meticulously maintained gardens, a symbol of the family's power and influence in the construction industry throughout the Pacific Northwest. From inside, through the library's wide windows, Gabriel Wilson watched the horizon painted in orange and purple, while his thoughts wandered between spreadsheets, contracts, and the growing uneasiness he had been feeling for weeks. At 38, Gabriel had transformed the family business into an empire. Tall with strong features and eyes that conveyed a natural authority, he carried on his shoulders not only the weight of a billion-dollar business, but also the responsibility for his mother, Martha, who after a stroke 3 years ago depended on constant care. The soft sound of the door opening interrupted his thoughts. "Son, it's getting dark and you're still locked in here." Martha's voice, though weakened by years and illness, maintained the same sweetness that Gabriel had known since childhood. Turning to face his mother, Gabriel smiled. Martha, in her wheelchair, seemed smaller than she really was, but her green eyes remained vivid, alert, capable of reading her son's soul like no one else. "I'm just organizing some papers. Mom, the merger with Ribeiro Construction is almost complete." Martha adjusted the blanket over her legs and maneuvered the chair closer to her son. "Too much work, too much worry, and the wedding is approaching. We need to talk about this, Gabriel." Gabriel's expression hardened slightly. His marriage to Lauren Montgomery, scheduled for 3 months from now, was a subject he preferred to keep in a separate compartment of his life, far away from business and concerns about his mother's health. "Lauren is taking care of everything. Mom, you don't need to worry." "It's not the wedding I'm worried about, son. It's you. It's both of you." Martha hesitated, weighing her words. "Are you sure Lauren is the right person?" The question hung in the air like a dense cloud. Gabriel instinctively adjusted his tie, a gesture he always made when feeling uncomfortable. "Of course I am, Mom. We've been together for 2 years. Lauren is intelligent, successful, comes from a good family. She understands my world. And is that enough?" Martha's eyes sought something deeper in her son's gaze. "Understanding your world doesn't necessarily mean understanding your heart, Gabriel." Before he could answer, the sound of high heels echoed through the marble corridor. Lauren Montgomery entered the library like a gust of perfumed wind, impeccable in her navy blue dress, black hair perfectly styled, and a calculated smile on her red-painted lips. "Ah, here you are. I've been looking all over." Lauren approached, kissed Gabriel quickly, and then turned to Martha with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Martha, shouldn't you be resting?" "It's past your medication time, isn't it?" The subtlety with which Lauren managed to sound concerned, while clearly suggesting that Martha was in the way, didn't go unnoticed by the older woman. Even so, Martha maintained her composure. "We were just talking about your wedding, dear." "Oh, wonderful. I have so much news." The caterer finally confirmed the menu, and I got that decorator from Seattle that I wanted so much. Lauren rested her hand on Gabriel's shoulder. "It will be the event of the year, won't it, love? All the important names in Portland society will be there." Gabriel nodded automatically, observing the interaction between the two women. There was a tension in the air that he preferred to ignore. Since announcing the engagement, he had noticed that his mother had become more reserved, more cautious when speaking about Lauren. He attributed this to a mother's natural fear of losing her only son to another woman. "Excuse me, I'll check if Louisa has prepared dinner." Martha maneuvered her chair toward the door. "Don't trouble yourself, Martha. I've already asked Rita to serve dinner at 8, and I've also instructed her about your medications." Lauren spoke sweetly, but there was an imperceptibly authoritarian tone in her voice. Martha stopped, her aged face frozen in a neutral expression that hid her frustration. "Thank you, Lauren, but I like to check personally. Old housewife habits, you'll understand when you're older." When Martha left, Lauren sighed dramatically. "Your mother still doesn't trust me to manage this house, does she? It's been a year since I moved in, and I still feel like a visitor." Gabriel hugged his fiancée, trying to push away the uncomfortable feeling growing in his chest. "She just needs time, love." My mother has always been the pillar of this house since my father left us. It's hard for her to let go of that role. I understand. Lauren adjusted the lapel of Gabriel's suit with delicate fingers. But when we get married, some things will need to change. I was even thinking we should discuss care alternatives for her. There are wonderful facilities with trained professionals. Facilities? Gabriel stepped back, frowning. My mother is not going to any facility, Lauren. This is her home. Of course, my darling, it was just a suggestion. Lauren skillfully retreated. I only want the best for all of us. A happy family, isn't that what we want? As they headed to dinner, Gabriel couldn't shake the feeling that something was out of place in his seemingly perfect life. As an architect by training and a builder by profession, he knew how to recognize when a structure showed subtle flaws in its foundation. And there was something in the structure of that relationship that was beginning to show almost imperceptible cracks. Dinner proceeded in a forcibly pleasant atmosphere. Lauren dominated the conversation with wedding plans, comments about mutual acquaintances, and stories from her work as a public relations executive for an important Pacific Northwest winery. Gabriel responded automatically, while observing his mother, silent, moving food around without really eating. Later that night, after everyone had retired, a storm began to fall over Portland. The wind whipped the trees in the garden, and rain lashed against the windows violently. Gabriel, still in his office, tried to concentrate on the merger documents, but his thoughts were scattered. The conversation with his mother and Lauren's suggestion about care alternatives bothered him more than he would like to admit. It was then that a particularly loud thunderclap made him look up from his papers. Through the window, something caught his attention in the side garden. A subtle movement, almost imperceptible among the bushes near the porch. Initially, he thought it was just the wind rustling the foliage, but then he saw it again, a small shadow moving stealthily. Intrigued and slightly concerned, Gabriel grabbed an umbrella and went out to check. The rain fell mercilessly as he made his way around the house toward the side garden. That's when he saw her, a little girl soaked and trembling, huddled under the small roof of the side porch. She couldn't have been more than 9 or 10 years old, with dark hair stuck to her pale face, and large eyes that displayed a mixture of fear and desperation. "My God, what are you doing here?" Gabriel approached cautiously, trying not to frighten her even more. The girl backed away, pressing herself against the wall like a cornered animal. Her bare feet were dirty, and there were scratches on her thin arms. She didn't answer, just looked at Gabriel intensely, as if assessing whether she could trust him. "It's okay, I won't hurt you," he continued, kneeling to be at her height. "What's your name? Where are your parents?" At that moment, the side door opened, revealing Martha in her wheelchair, with an expression of surprise that quickly turned to concern. "Gabriel, what's happening?" I heard voices, and her eyes fell on the huddled girl, and something in her gaze changed instantly. It was as if an immediate connection had been established between the elderly lady and the frightened child. "Oh my God, bring her inside, Gabriel. Quick, this child will catch pneumonia in this storm." The girl looked at Martha, and surprisingly her expression seemed to relax a little. There was something in the old woman's presence that conveyed safety. Gabriel hesitated. "Mom, we don't know who she is or where she came from. Maybe we should call the authorities first." "Authorities? In this rain? By the time they arrive, this child could be—" Martha stopped, avoiding finishing the sentence. "Bring her inside, son. Now we'll sort out the rest later." The maternal authority in Martha's voice left no room for discussion. Gabriel extended his hand to the girl, who, after a moment of hesitation, timidly accepted it. Together, they entered the Wilson mansion, not knowing that that rainy night would mark the beginning of a profound transformation in their lives. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give it a like. Tell us what city you're watching from. We continue. Dawn arrived with a serenity that contrasted with the previous night's storm. The first rays of sunlight penetrated through the gaps in the curtains of the Wilson mansion, illuminating the guest room where the mysterious girl slept deeply. Wrapped in soft sheets, probably the most comfortable she had ever felt against her skin, she breathed calmly, her face finally relaxed after the terror of the previous night. Martha, who had insisted on keeping vigil during part of the night, observed the child from the doorway. There was something about that girl that awakened an almost fierce protective instinct in her. Perhaps it was the frightened eyes, or the way she had shrunk when Lauren entered the living room demanding explanations. The scene from the previous night still echoed in Martha's mind. Gabriel had brought the girl inside, while Rita, the housekeeper, rushed to get towels and dry clothes. The little one was shaking so much that her teeth chattered, but she didn't make a single sound. It was Martha who took the lead, speaking with a soft voice and slow movements as if approaching an injured bird. "It's all right, dear. No one is going to hurt you here. Let's get those wet clothes off and give you something warm to drink." The girl looked at everything with wide, attentive eyes, especially at Martha's wheelchair, as if she had never seen anything like it before. She allowed them to help her change clothes and accepted the cup of hot chocolate that Rita prepared, holding it with both hands as if it were a precious treasure. That was when Lauren entered the room like a hurricane, her face a mask of poorly disguised indignation. "What's going on here? Who is this child? Gabriel, did you bring a street girl into our house?" The little one visibly shrank, her eyes darting to the nearest exit as if calculating an escape route. "Lauren, please." Gabriel tried to calm his fiancée. She was alone in the storm, soaked to the bone. "What did you want me to do?" "Call the proper authorities, obviously. There are institutions for this kind of situation." The look Lauren gave the girl was loaded with disdain. "We can't just collect children from the street as if they were abandoned dogs. You don't know where she came from, who her parents are, if she ran away from home. She could have serious problems." Martha noticed how each of Lauren's words seemed like a physical blow to the girl. Something in her maternal instinct told her that this child had heard similar words before, and not in pleasant circumstances. "Lauren, that's enough." Martha's voice, although soft, had a tone that admitted no argument. "This girl needs help, not an interrogation. She will spend the night here, and tomorrow we'll decide what to do. Martha, with all due respect, this decision isn't yours alone to make. This house is also Gabriel's and mine, and I have the right to have a say about who comes in and who goes out." Gabriel, who until then had seemed torn between compassion and practicality, looked at his fiancée with an expression that mixed surprise and disappointment. "Lauren, my mother is right. We're not going to discuss this now in front of the child. She stays tonight, and tomorrow we'll resolve the situation." That was one of the rare occasions when Gabriel openly contradicted Lauren, and her reaction didn't go unnoticed. Her eyes narrowed for an instant before her face returned to its habitual composure. "Of course, darling. I'm just thinking about everyone's well-being." She smiled, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "After all, we have legal responsibilities to consider." Now in the light of morning, Martha reflected on that moment. The way Lauren reacted said a lot about her, more than Lauren herself realized she was revealing. The truth is that, from the beginning of her son's relationship with Lauren Montgomery, Martha had felt that something didn't fit. Her daughter-in-law was perfectly polite and attentive when Gabriel was present, but when they were alone there were subtleties, a slightly harsh tone of voice, veiled comments about Gabriel's dependence, constant suggestions about how the house should be reorganized for the new couple. A movement in the bed pulled Martha from her thoughts. The girl was waking up, her dark eyes blinking in confusion before widening as she recognized the unfamiliar environment. "Good morning, dear," Martha smiled, maneuvering her chair to enter the room. "Did you sleep well?" The girl sat up in bed, clearly on guard, but nodded slightly. "You still haven't told us your name." Martha approached, maintaining a respectful distance. "Mine is Martha. You're in my house, and here you're safe." The child looked at her for long seconds, as if assessing the sincerity of those words. Her eyes dropped to the necklace around Martha's neck, a delicate star-shaped pendant, a gift that Gabriel had given his mother on her 60th birthday. "Do you like it?" Martha touched the pendant. "It's a star. My son gave it to me because he says I'm the point of light that guides his path." She smiled at the memory. "Do you know what a star is, don't you? Those bright points in the night sky." The girl nodded again, and her lips moved silently, as if she wanted to speak but had forgotten how. "You have a star too." Martha pointed to the girl's neck, where a thin, dirty cord with a small star-shaped pendant was almost hidden under the borrowed t-shirt. "Look at that, we're similar." That's when it happened, the first smile. Small, hesitant, but genuine. The girl touched her own pendant and then Martha's, establishing a silent connection between them. "How about we call you Little Star while we don't know your real name?" Would that be okay? The girl considered the suggestion for a moment and then nodded, the smile widening a bit more. Great. Now, little star, shall we have breakfast? Rita prepared little rain cakes that are delicious with hot chocolate. At that moment, the door to the room opened completely, and Gabriel entered. He was formally dressed for the office, but his expression seemed lighter than the night before. Good morning. I see our visitor is awake. He smiled at the girl, who immediately became tense again. Don't be afraid, little one. No one is going to hurt you here. My son, Gabriel, Martha introduced, and then added with a twinkle in her eye, and this is little Star, at least for now. Gabriel raised an eyebrow. Little Star? She has a star pendant like mine, Martha explained. And she still hasn't told us her real name. I see. Gabriel approached cautiously, crouching to be at the girl's height. Well, little Star, it's a pleasure to officially meet you. I hope you slept well. The girl studied him with her intense eyes, seeming to evaluate every movement, every expression. Finally, she made a small affirmative gesture with her head. Great. Today I'll need to go to the office, but when I return, we'll talk about how we can help you, okay? Gabriel looked at his mother. In the meantime, I'm sure you'll be in good hands with Martha. Breakfast was served on the spacious back porch, overlooking the well-tended garden where begonias and hydrangeas colored the scenery. Little Star ate slowly, savoring each piece of the rain cakes as if they were rare delicacies. Her eyes scanned the environment, recording every detail, every exit, every person who passed by. It was the behavior of someone accustomed to always being alert. Lauren appeared when they were finishing breakfast. She wore an elegant skirt and blazer ensemble, ready for her work as a public relations executive. Her smile was radiant, as if the incident from the night before had never occurred. Good morning, Martha. Her voice was musical. And good morning to you too, little one. The smile she directed at little Star didn't reach her eyes. Good morning. Lauren, replied Martha, observing how little Star immediately stopped eating and lowered her gaze to her plate. Have you had breakfast yet? Rita can prepare more cakes. Oh no, thank you. I'm late for an important meeting. Lauren picked an apple from the fruit bowl. I just came by to let you know I won't be home for lunch, and to ask if Gabriel has contacted the proper authorities about... She gestured discreetly in little Star's direction. This situation. Gabriel said he would take care of it today, Martha responded calmly, though she felt a pang of apprehension. But there's no rush, Lauren. The girl isn't bothering anyone. Of course not, Martha. Lauren's tone was sweet, but her next words had a thread of steel. We just need to remember that harboring a minor without informing the authorities can have legal consequences. And we have the wedding coming up, the company merger. We don't need unnecessary complications, do we? Martha observed how little Star seemed to shrink with each of Lauren's words, as if trying to become invisible. There was something in the girl's reaction that confirmed her suspicions. She had already been through difficult situations before. I'm sure Gabriel will know how to handle the situation in the right way. Lauren, Martha replied, maintaining her composure. Now, if you don't mind, little Star and I have plans for the morning. I'm going to show her our collection of children's books in the library. Lauren adjusted her bag on her shoulder, her smile faltering for an instant. Of course. Have fun. She leaned in to kiss Martha's cheek, whispering, Just be careful, Martha. We don't know anything about this girl. And you are fragile. When Lauren left, Martha noticed that her hand was trembling slightly. She took a deep breath, regaining control. It wasn't the time to let her own fears interfere. She looked at little Star, who was watching her with a surprising intensity for someone so young. Don't worry about Lauren, Martha said softly. She's just concerned with formalities. Now how about those books I promised? The morning passed peacefully, with Martha reading stories to little Star in the cozy library of the mansion. The girl listened attentively to every word, her eyes shining with fascination. Occasionally, she would point to an illustration or touch a page with careful fingers, as if the books were fragile treasures. It was during the third story that something extraordinary happened. When Martha paused to take a drink of water, little Star pointed to a word on the page and, with a hoarse, low voice as if she were unearthing the ability to speak, pronounced, Star. Martha froze, surprised and moved. Yes, that's right, dear, Star. Do you know how to read? Little Star made a vague gesture with her hand, indicating more or less. "You spoke, Little Star, that's wonderful." The girl seemed surprised at herself, touching her own lips as if to confirm that she had really spoken. Then, slowly, a genuine smile illuminated her face, completely transforming her. In that instant, Martha knew that whatever happened, she would not allow that child to return to any situation that had erased her voice and her smile. The following days brought a subtle yet profound change to the Wilson mansion. Like water slowly shaping stone, Little Star's presence began to transform the dynamics of that home. Gabriel, initially concerned with the legal implications of harboring an unknown child, had discreetly contacted a lawyer friend of the family, who recommended alerting Child Protective Services and social services as soon as possible, but also assured that they would find a way to ensure the girl remained in good hands. "We need to understand where she came from, Gabriel," explained Dr. Marcus Andrews during a private conversation in the mansion's office. "There could be parents looking for her, or perhaps she ran away from an institution. Either way, we need to follow legal protocols." Gabriel agreed, but something inside him hesitated. In the few days that Little Star had been there, he had witnessed a remarkable change in his mother. Martha seemed more animated, more alive. The connection between the elderly lady and the small, mysterious girl was almost palpable. They spent hours in the library, with Martha patiently helping Little Star read simple words, or in the garden, where the girl watched fascinated as Martha explained about each plant and flower. And there was more. Little Star herself was beginning to change. Although she still spoke very little, she used more and more single words, usually whispered in Martha's ear. Her eyes, previously constantly vigilant, now occasionally relaxed, especially when in the presence of the old woman. For the first time, Gabriel heard her laugh, a crystalline, light sound when Martha told a funny story about a cat the family had when Gabriel was a child. "We need more time," Gabriel told the lawyer, his voice firm. "Just a few more days. She's still adapting, starting to trust us. I don't want to traumatize her again by immediately throwing her into the system." Dr. Andrews adjusted his glasses, observing his client and friend attentively. "Gabriel, I understand your concern, but the longer time passes, the more complicated the legal situation will become. And there's also the matter of Lauren." The name of his fiancée hung in the air like a charged cloud. Gabriel knew well what his friend meant. Lauren made clear her dissatisfaction with the girl's presence at every opportunity. Her comments, always carefully wrapped in concern, became increasingly frequent. "Gabriel, I'm worried about your mother. She's becoming too attached to this child. What if they have to return her? It will break her heart. Or else, love, don't you find it strange that the girl barely speaks? Who knows what kind of psychological problems she might have? This could be dangerous, especially with your mother in such a vulnerable state. And still, the wedding is coming up. We need to finalize so many details, and this situation is taking precious time. Your mother should be helping me with the preparations, not playing school with a street child." With each comment, Gabriel felt a pang of discomfort, but preferred not to confront. Life had already taught him that it was easier to focus on work and let domestic tensions resolve themselves, a tactic that had worked until then, but that was beginning to show its cracks. "I'll contact social services at the beginning of next week," Gabriel finally decided. "But I want guarantees that she'll be all right, Marcus. I can't simply return her to a bad situation." The lawyer nodded, understanding his friend's dilemma. "I'll activate some contacts, see what we can discover about her. Perhaps there's already a history in the system." Meanwhile, in the back area of the mansion, Little Star was helping Rita hang sheets on the clothesline. The housekeeper, a robust middle-aged woman with more than 15 years of service to the Wilsons, had quickly become fond of the small visitor. "You have skillful hands, girl," commented Rita, observing how Little Star carefully folded the corners of the sheets. "You've done this kind of work before, haven't you?" Little Star nodded slightly, her eyes momentarily clouded by a distant memory. "At the orphanage?" Rita asked gently. The girl became motionless for an instant, as if the word had triggered an internal alarm. Then very slowly she nodded again. "I understand." Rita didn't press, perceiving the child's discomfort. "Well, here you don't need to work, you know. You can just be a child." Little Star looked at her with an expression that mixed confusion and disbelief, as if the concept of just being a child was completely foreign to her. "It's true," continued Rita, hanging another sheet. "Children should play, study, make art, even get a little dirty. When my children were small, they'd occasionally appear covered in mud from head to toe after an afternoon in the yard." The girl smiled timidly, perhaps imagining what such freedom would be like. "Rita, what do you think you're doing?" Lauren's cutting voice interrupted the moment. She came along the garden path, impeccable in her red dress, high heels sinking into the soft grass. "Mrs. Lauren, we're just hanging some clothes," Rita responded, straightening up. "I'm not referring to that. I'm referring to having this child help with household chores." Lauren approached, her strong perfume enveloping them like a suffocating cloud. "This could be interpreted as child labor, Rita. Do you want to cause us legal problems?" Rita blushed, embarrassed. "It wasn't like that, Mrs. Lauren. The girl wanted to help and It doesn't matter. She shouldn't be out here, and she certainly shouldn't be doing household chores." Lauren turned to Little Star with a forced smile. "Dear, why don't you go look for Martha? I'm sure she's missing you." Little Star looked from Rita to Lauren, catching the tension in the air. Her dark eyes narrowed slightly, assessing Lauren with a perception beyond her years. Without saying a word, she turned and walked toward the house. As soon as the girl moved away, Lauren's smile disappeared. "Rita, this situation is already complicated enough without you involving the girl in the house routines. She doesn't belong here, understand that? She's just a temporary visitor." Rita, who had served the family long enough to have seen Gabriel grow up, felt a wave of indignation. "With all due respect, Mrs. Lauren, the girl was just helping. There's no harm in that. The harm, Rita, is in creating false expectations. Gabriel has already contacted the authorities. Soon they will come for her. The more she adapts here, the more difficult the separation will be." Lauren adjusted the strap of her designer bag. "I'm just being realistic and thinking about everyone's well-being." Rita lowered her eyes, knowing it was useless to argue. "Yes, Mum." Inside the house, Little Star found Martha in the library, organizing some children's books she had specially selected for her. Upon seeing the girl, the old woman's face lit up. "Ah, there you are, Little Star. I found more wonderful books that I'm sure you'll love. This one has beautiful illustrations of constellations. Do you know what constellations are?" Little Star shook her head, approaching curiously. "They are groups of stars that, seen from Earth, form patterns in the night sky. The ancients saw shapes of animals, heroes, and mythical creatures in them." Martha opened the book, revealing colorful illustrations of starry skies. "See, this is Ursa Major, which looks like a giant bear. And this is Orion, the hunter." Little Star's eyes shone as she absorbed every word, every image. Her fingers delicately traced the outlines of the constellations, Lul-like. "Stars," she whispered, the words still coming out with difficulty. "I like them too, dear." Martha smiled, moved by each small progress in the girl's communication. "Did you know that each star we see in the sky is like a sun? Some are much larger than ours, others smaller. They're so far away that the light we see today began its journey thousands of years ago. Like magic? A bit like magic, yes. But it's science, although science sometimes can be as wonderful as magic." They spent the afternoon immersed in books and conversations about stars, planets, and galaxies. Little Star absorbed each piece of information with an insatiable thirst for knowledge, as if trying to compensate for years of intellectual deprivation. Occasionally she asked simple questions, each word carefully pronounced, as if testing her own voice. As night fell, Gabriel returned from the office, finding mother and girl still in the library, now trying to locate constellations on a celestial map. "Looks like you two had a productive day," he commented with a smile, observing the books spread out and the drawings that Little Star had made, colored stars and planets, with the set of colored pencils that Martha had found among Gabriel's old belongings. "Oh, very productive," Martha exclaimed, animated. "Our Little Star is learning about astronomy. And she made more progress with speech today. I'm so proud." Gabriel noticed the sparkle in his mother's eyes, a sparkle he hadn't seen since before the stroke that had confined her to the wheelchair. It was as if Little Star had brought back a vital part of Martha that had been dormant. "That's wonderful, Mom." He approached, crouching beside Little Star's chair. "And you, did you enjoy learning about the stars?" Little Star nodded, looking at him with less apprehension than in the first days. Slowly she pushed one of her drawings toward him, a night sky full of colorful stars. "For you," she said, the two words loaded with meaning. Gabriel felt something tighten in his chest. It was the girl's first spontaneous gesture toward him. "Thank you, little star, it's beautiful. I'll cherish it." At that moment, Lauren entered the library, pausing briefly as she noticed the family scene before her. Her usual smile was in place, but her eyes registered everything with calculated attention. "What a lovely scene," she commented, approaching to kiss Gabriel. "How was your day, darling? Did you manage to speak with Dr. Marcus about the situation?" Gabriel noticed how little star immediately withdrew at Lauren's arrival, returning to the defensive posture of the first days. "Yes, I spoke with him. We'll give it a few more days and then formally contact social services." He carefully placed little star's drawing on the table. "In the meantime, she stays with us." Lauren maintained her smile, but Gabriel noticed the slight contraction in her jaw. "Of course, love. Whatever you think is best. By the way, I received a call from the florist today. We need to confirm the arrangements for the wedding by Friday. I thought we could discuss it during dinner." "Certainly," Gabriel replied, feeling the familiar weight of reality return to his shoulders. "I'll just change and meet you at the table." When Gabriel left, Lauren remained for a moment, observing Martha and little star. Her gaze fell on the astronomy books, the colorful drawings, and the evident bond between the elderly woman and the girl. "Astronomy, Martha? Don't you think that's a subject a bit advanced for a child of this age? And with her limitations." "Limitations?" Martha raised an eyebrow. "I don't see any limitation in this child, Lauren. Only unexplored potential." Of course, Lauren tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "I'm just concerned about you. You're investing so much in this relationship, and soon what, Lauren?" Martha's voice acquired a steely tone that would surprise those who knew her only superficially. Lauren hesitated, realizing she was treading on dangerous ground. "Soon we'll have to find her family or a suitable home. It's the normal procedure. We'll see." Martha smiled serenely, returning her attention to little star. "Now, if you'll excuse us, we have a few more constellations to discover before dinner." That night, as the Wilson mansion quieted down, invisible bonds strengthened, and silent tensions grew. In the darkness of the guest room, little star looked out the window at the starry sky, her small star-shaped pendant clutched in her hand. And in another room, Lauren carefully planned her next steps, determined not to let an unknown child interfere with the plans she had so meticulously laid out. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give it a like. Tell us what city you're watching from. We continue. A week had passed since little star's arrival, and the Wilson mansion was no longer the same. Small, subtle changes could be noticed in every corner. Children's books piled on the center table, a new set of colored pencils on the library desk, an extra chair at the dining table. More significant, however, were the changes in the people. Martha, who for months had rarely left her room, except for meals and medical consultations, was now found in different rooms of the house, her wheelchair maneuvering with renewed energy through the corridors as she showed little star every detail of the mansion. Her physical therapy sessions, previously faced with resignation, became moments of determination. "I need to get stronger to take care of her," she confessed to the physiotherapist, who noticed with surprise the sudden progress. Little star was also flourishing, albeit timidly. Her words, once rare and whispered, now formed short but complete sentences. Her body, previously permanently tense like an animal ready to flee, was beginning to relax. Occasionally, Rita caught her humming softly, while drawing or helping to water the indoor garden plants. Gabriel, divided between intense work and growing domestic tension, found moments of surprising peace in interactions with little star. Despite his initial reservations and practical concerns, he found himself fascinated by the girl's vivid intelligence and by the way she had brought life back to his mother's eyes. The only one who seemed impervious to the little one's charm was Lauren. As the days passed, her barely disguised irritation transformed into a more calculated strategy. She now alternated between completely ignoring the girl's existence and demonstrating false sweetness when Gabriel was present, a change that didn't go unnoticed by Martha, nor by little star herself, whose attentive eyes missed no detail. On that sunny Wednesday, Martha had convinced her son to allow a trip to the Portland Botanical Gardens. The girl needs to see more of the world beyond these walls, Gabriel. And I need fresh air too. Reluctant but unable to deny the obvious good that little Star did to his mother's emotional health, Gabriel authorized the outing, designating Rodrigo, the family's trusted driver, to accompany them with the van adapted for the wheelchair. The outing was an absolute success. Little Star, who possibly had never been in such a beautiful place, marveled at the greenhouses, the fountains, and especially at the diversity of flowers. Martha, an expert amateur botanist, patiently explained the name of each species, encouraging the girl to repeat the more complex words. When they returned to the mansion in the late afternoon, Little Star's face was flushed with excitement, and her hands held a small bouquet of flowers that the Botanical Gardens gardener, enchanted with her genuine interest, had gifted her. "I'll put them in water," she announced, her longest sentence yet. As she carefully carried the multicolored treasure to the kitchen, Martha watched the girl walk away with a satisfied smile. "She's progressing so much, Rita. Did you see how she interacted with that gardener today? No fear, just curiosity." Rita, who was preparing the afternoon snack, nodded. "It's a miracle, Martha. When she arrived, I thought we would never hear her speak. Now look, we all primarily need security and affection to flourish," Martha replied, her eyes following the small figure now talking with the cook, asking for a vase for the flowers. "This child just needs to feel that she's safe. And she is, isn't she? Here with you." Martha hesitated. "For now, Rita. For now." Later that night, after dinner, Gabriel met with his mother in the library. Little Star had been put to bed by Martha, who told her stories until her heavy eyes finally closed. "How was the outing?" Gabriel asked, pouring himself a finger of whiskey as he settled into the leather armchair next to his mother's wheelchair. "Wonderful. You should have seen her in the sensory garden, touching the aromatic herbs, feeling each texture, each scent." Martha smiled at the memory. "It's as if she were experiencing everything for the first time." "And she probably is," Gabriel commented, a crease of concern forming between his eyebrows. Marcus got some information about her. From the pendant and the approximate age, he believes she might be Cecilia Oliveira, a girl who disappeared from a shelter in Beaverton about 2 weeks ago. Martha felt her heart tighten. Cecilia. The name seemed strange. It didn't match the little one they had nicknamed Little Star. "The shelter is not well rated. Mum, there are reports of neglect, lack of qualified personnel." Gabriel took a sip of his drink. "Marcus is verifying more details before we make any formal report. But eventually we'll have to give her back," Martha completed, her voice betraying the pain she felt at this prospect. "Unless there's an alternative," Gabriel said carefully. Marcus mentioned the possibility of temporary fostering while her legal situation is investigated. "Considering her history of escape and indications of institutional neglect, perhaps we can—" "That would be wonderful, Gabriel." Martha instantly perked up. "We could take care of her, give her the home she deserves until a permanent solution is found. And who knows, don't nurture expectations too high, Mom," Gabriel gently advised. "The adoption system in America is complex, especially for single people my age or the elderly. And there's also the matter of Lauren." At the mention of her daughter-in-law, Martha's countenance darkened. "Gabriel, we need to talk about Lauren." "Mom, please," Gabriel sighed, rubbing his forehead. "I know you two have your differences, but they're not just differences, Gabriel. It's the way she treats Little Star, how she treats me when you're not present, how she manipulates situations to always appear as the victim or the sensible one." Gabriel observed his mother, noting the seriousness in her gaze. Martha rarely criticized Lauren openly, preferring mild comments or significant silences. This direct confrontation was unusual. "Mom, I know Lauren can be a bit intense at times. She has great social ambitions, and yes, maybe she's not as warm as you'd like. But she loves me and—" "She loves what you represent, Gabriel," Martha interrupted, unable to contain herself. "Your status, your company, your social position." "That's not fair," Gabriel replied, but his voice betrayed an uncertainty that didn't go unnoticed by his mother. "I'm not saying this to hurt you, son. God knows your happiness is all I want. But I've seen things that you don't see, heard things that you don't hear." Gabriel placed his glass on the side table, suddenly uncomfortable. "What things, Mom?" Martha hesitated. For months she had kept to herself the malicious comments, the disrespectful attitudes, fearing to create a conflict between mother and son. Now, with little Star in the equation, the fear of speaking was overcome by the fear of remaining silent. "She talks about sending me to a specialized facility after the wedding, Gabriel. She plans to transform my room into a closet for her bags and shoes. She comments about how I'm a burden to you, about how my condition limits your social life." Gabriel paled. "Mom, are you sure? Maybe you've misinterpreted." "There's no misinterpretation when someone tells your employee that soon she won't have to put up with the controlling old woman in a wheelchair," Martha responded firmly. A heavy silence fell between them. Gabriel wanted to refute, to defend his fiancée, but something in his mother's words echoed truths that he himself had begun to suspect. Small moments of Lauren's impatience with Martha, seemingly innocent comments about more suitable care options, the constant attempt to distance him from his mother. "Why didn't you tell me this before?" he finally asked, his voice hoarse with contained emotion. "Because you seemed happy, son, and because I thought maybe it was just motherly jealousy, that I was being unfair," Martha sighed. "But then little Star arrived, and I saw how Lauren really is when confronted with something or someone that doesn't fit into her perfect plans." What could Gabriel say? His mother's words opened a wound that he knew existed, but preferred to ignore. His relationship with Lauren had always been more a convenient partnership than an overwhelming passion. She was intelligent, ambitious, socially connected, a companion who complemented his public and professional life. When she had moved into the mansion the previous year, Gabriel had believed that living together would strengthen the emotional bonds between them. Now looking back, he realized that exactly the opposite had happened. "I'll think about this, Mom," he finally said, rising. "I need time to process all of this." Martha nodded, knowing she had planted a seed that needed to germinate at the right time. "Just observe, Gabriel. Observe how she acts when she thinks no one important is watching." The next morning, the mansion was awakened by the sound of childish laughter, a sound so rare and precious that it made everyone who heard it smile involuntarily. In the kitchen, little Star was helping Rita prepare pancakes, her new culinary passion. With her sleeves rolled up and an improvised apron that wrapped twice around her small body, she mixed the batter with absolute concentration, while Rita affectionately supervised. "Very good. Now let's add a little vanilla. Like this." Rita guided the girl's small hand as she poured a few drops of extract into the bowl. It was at this moment that Lauren entered the kitchen, already impeccably dressed in a black tailored suit. Her hair perfectly arranged despite the early hour. "Rita, I need you to—" she began, but stopped at the domestic scene in front of her. Her gaze fell on little Star, on the mess of flour on the counter, on the casual intimacy that the child demonstrated in that space. Something darkened in her eyes. "What is this?" "Good morning, Mrs. Lauren," Rita greeted cautiously. "We're just preparing breakfast. The girl wanted to learn how to make pancakes in the main kitchen with the family utensils." Lauren dropped her bag on the table with a dull thud. "Rita, we've already talked about appropriate boundaries." Little Star immediately stopped stirring the batter, her eyes becoming vigilant again. Rita placed a protective hand on her shoulder. "Mrs. Lauren, it was my idea," Martha approved. "There's no harm in teaching the girl to cook a little." "The harm is in creating false expectations," Lauren replied, her tone controlled but icy. "This is not her home, Rita. She is a temporary guest, and soon she'll return to the place where she belongs." Little Star visibly shrank, her eyes lowering to the floor. Rita felt a wave of indignation grow within her. "With all due respect, Mrs. Lauren, this is not your house yet either. It's the Wilsons' house, and both Mr. Gabriel and Martha have approved of the girl feeling at home here." Lauren narrowed her eyes, surprised by the housekeeper's unusual insubordination. "Be careful with your tone, Rita. After the wedding, many things will change around here, including the household staff." The threat hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Rita pressed her lips together, torn between the fear of losing the job that supported her family and the desire to protect the child who trembled slightly at her side. Little Star, perceiving the conflict, suddenly spoke. "I'll clean up." Her voice was small but determined as she began to collect the used utensils. "Don't bother," Lauren said coldly. "Rita will take care of that. It's not children's work. I like to help," Little Star replied, raising her gaze to meet Lauren's. It was a brief but charged moment, the small, fragile girl facing the hard gaze of the elegant woman. Something in the firmness of those childish eyes seemed to deeply disturb Lauren. "As you wish," she finally said, composing herself. "Rita, when you finish this cooking session, I need you to prepare my breakfast on the porch. I have a video conference in half an hour." When Lauren left, both Rita and Little Star released the breath they hadn't realized they were holding. The housekeeper crouched in front of the girl, checking her worried face. "It's all right, dear. Mrs. Lauren is just stressed about the wedding." Little Star slowly shook her head. "She doesn't. Like me." The simple sincerity of the observation momentarily left Rita speechless. "Oh, sweetie, it's not quite like that." "It's okay," Little Star shrugged with surprising maturity for her age. "She doesn't have to like me." That afternoon, while Martha rested after her physical therapy session, Little Star wandered silently through the corridors of the mansion. Her steps led her to Gabriel's office, where she knew she could find more interesting books. The door was ajar and she was about to knock timidly when she heard voices coming from inside, Gabriel and Lauren in a heated discussion. "It's not fair to me, Gabriel. I'm trying to plan our wedding, our life together, and you're completely absorbed in this girl's situation. Lauren, please lower your voice. We're just doing what's right. The girl needs help. And since when is that your responsibility? There are institutions for this, Gabriel. Institutions that will know how to deal with her problems much better than we do." "What problems?" "She's just a child who has been through trauma. And she's progressing incredibly well here with us." "That's exactly the point." "With us?" "There is no us in this equation, Gabriel. It's your mother who is completely obsessed with this girl. It's like she's found a new charity project to replace you." There was a moment of tense silence. Little Star, partially hidden by the door, barely breathed. "That's unfair, and you know it." Gabriel's voice was lower now, controlled. "My mother has finally found something that brings her joy after all she's been through. How can you criticize that?" "Because it's affecting our plans, Gabriel. The wedding is less than 3 months away, and instead of focusing on that, we're dealing with a problematic girl of unknown origin." "Cecilia," Gabriel corrected. "Her name is probably Cecilia, whatever. The point is that she doesn't belong here, and I won't allow a street child to ruin everything we've planned together." Little Star felt her heart race. They knew her real name. They knew where she came from. The fear that had begun to disappear in recent days returned with full force, freezing her blood. "As for your mother," Lauren's voice continued, lower and more calculated now, "you know I respect her, Gabriel, but we have to be realistic. She's elderly, her health is fragile. She can't take on the responsibility of raising a child. After the wedding, we'll need to consider more suitable care options for her. We've already discussed this, Lauren. My mother is not going to any facility." "It doesn't have to be a facility. It could be a luxury retirement home with all the necessary medical assistance. Think about how much that would make our life easier, Gabriel. We could travel without worries, restructure the house our way." "Your way?" "You mean?" Gabriel interrupted, his voice now carrying an unusual coldness. Little Star heard footsteps approaching the door and quickly hid behind a decorative column in the corridor. The office door opened completely, and Gabriel came out, followed closely by Lauren. "This conversation is not over, Gabriel. For me, it's over for today, Lauren. So I need to get back to work." When the corridor was empty again, Little Star emerged from her hiding place, her small heart beating erratically. Lauren wanted to get rid of her. She wanted to send Martha away. She wanted to change everything. And now she knew her real name, Cecilia. The name that brought painful memories of the shelter, the punishments, the hunger, the constant fear. With silent steps, learned during years of survival in hostile environments, Little Star ran to the only place where she truly felt safe, Martha's room. She found the lady awake, leafing through an album of old photographs. Upon seeing the girl's disturbed expression, Martha immediately put the album aside. "What's wrong, my love? So you look like you've seen a ghost." Little Star hesitated, the words stuck in her throat. How to explain what she had heard? How to express the fear she felt of being sent back, of losing this brief moment of safety and affection she had found. "Lauren," she began, her voice trembling, "she wants to send away you and me." Martha frowned, extending her arms to the girl, who ran to the embrace as if it were her only safe harbor. "What did you hear, dear? Tell me everything." Night fell over the Wilson mansion like a heavy veil, bringing with it storm clouds that announced another Portland downpour. Dinner had proceeded in a tense silence, interrupted only by superficial comments about the weather or news of the day. Gabriel had barely touched his food, lost in thoughts that took him back to the conversation with Lauren and his mother's revelations. Little Star, seated next to Martha, had kept her eyes fixed on her plate, responding only with gestures to the lady's attempts to cheer her up. Lauren, on the other hand, seemed strangely satisfied, as if the general discomfort were somehow a personal victory. Occasionally she cast calculated glances at Gabriel, testing his reaction, measuring the impact of her earlier words. Now in his office, Gabriel tried to concentrate on the merger documents that needed his urgent attention, but his mind kept returning to Little Star's frightened face during dinner and his mother's expression of veiled concern. Something had changed in that house, something fundamental, and he felt torn between loyalty to Lauren, the woman with whom he had planned to build a future, and the growing suspicion that he had ignored important signs about her true nature. Soft knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. "Come in," he called, expecting to find Rita with the coffee he had requested a few minutes ago. To his surprise, it was Little Star who timidly opened the door, remaining hesitantly at the threshold. She wore borrowed pajamas from the old childhood wardrobe that Martha had preserved, several sizes larger than her small body, and was holding something in her hands, the drawing she had made for him days before. "Little Star?" Gabriel smiled, genuinely touched by the unexpected visit. "Shouldn't you be in bed by now?" The girl took 2 cautious steps into the office, her dark eyes assessing Gabriel with that peculiar intensity that seemed to see far beyond appearances. "Wanted to talk," she said, the words still coming out with effort, as if each one needed to overcome an invisible barrier. Of course, Gabriel moved his chair away from the desk, turning his full attention to the small visitor. "What do you want to talk about?" Little Star approached more, stopping just a few steps away. Her gaze roamed the office, the books on the high shelves, the well-tended plants, the family photographs. She paused for a moment on an image of teenage Gabriel beside his father, both smiling on a sailboat. "Your father?" she asked, pointing to the photograph. Gabriel nodded, a melancholy smile appearing on his lips. "Yes, Frank Wilson. He left us when I was 16. Heart problem." Little Star absorbed the information with a solemn nod, as if she perfectly understood the weight of the loss. "You loved him?" It wasn't a question, but a statement, said with the direct simplicity that only children possess. "Very much," Gabriel confirmed, surprised by the direction of the conversation. "He taught me almost everything I know about construction, about honor, about responsibility." "And Martha, you love her too?" Again, not a question. Gabriel felt something tighten in his chest. "Of course I do. My mother is all I have left. She's my foundation, my conscience." Little Star took another step forward, now so close that Gabriel could see the small golden reflections in her dark eyes. "Lauren wants to send Martha away," she finally said, the words coming out with difficulty but with determination. "To a facility after the wedding." Gabriel felt the blood freeze in his veins. The child's direct declaration, devoid of any subterfuge, hit him like a punch to the stomach. It was one thing for his mother to insinuate this, based on years of mistrust and small incidents. It was something completely different to hear the same accusation from the lips of a child who, he instinctively knew, had no reason whatsoever to lie. "You heard Lauren say this?" he asked cautiously, struggling to keep his voice steady. Little Star nodded gravely. "Behind the door, she talked about suitable options. Luxury retirement home." The girl paused, her gaze intensifying even more. "To make your life easier." Gabriel closed his eyes for a moment, Lauren's words echoing in his memory. Yes, she had mentioned this during the discussion. It wasn't Little Star's invention. The girl had really heard the conversation. "What else did you hear?" he asked softly. Little Star hesitated, biting her lower lip. My real name's Cecilia. The word came out almost like a painful whisper. Don't like that name, reminds... Bad place. The shelter. She nodded, her eyes suddenly misty. Bad people there. Hit children. Little food, cold. Her small hands closed into fists. Ran away when... He tried to hurt me. He who, little star. Gabriel felt a wave of fierce protection take over him. Director. Big man smells bad. Little star visibly shuddered. Don't want to go back, please. The last words were said with such vulnerability that Gabriel felt his heart break. Without thinking twice, he extended his arms and, to his surprise, Little Star came to them, allowing herself to be hugged for the first time since her arrival. You won't go back. I promise, Gabriel whispered, feeling the small body tremble against his. We'll find a way to keep you safe. At that moment, something changed inside Gabriel Wilson. As if a veil had been lifted from his eyes, he finally saw the situation with crystal clarity. Lauren's actions, her subtly manipulative suggestions about his mother, her barely disguised contempt for Little Star, all of this formed a pattern that he could no longer ignore. The office door opened again, and Lauren entered without knocking. She stopped abruptly upon seeing Gabriel hugging Little Star, her expression rapidly transforming from surprise to controlled indignation. Am I interrupting something? She asked, her tone falsely light. Little Star immediately moved away from the embrace, her body returning to the defensive posture. Gabriel, however, kept a protective hand on her shoulder. We were just talking, he replied, his eyes meeting Lauren's with a firmness that made her hesitate. Little Star has some concerns that she was sharing with me. I imagine, Lauren smiled coldly. And what would these concerns be that made her get out of bed at this hour? Before Gabriel could respond, Little Star spoke, her voice small but surprisingly firm. About you wanting to send Martha away. Lauren's face paled for an instant before she regained her composure. Her gaze passed from the girl to Gabriel, quickly assessing the situation. What absurdity is this? She laughed, but the sound was forced. Gabriel, don't tell me you're listening to a child who clearly has psychological problems. Problems caused by adults who should have protected her, Gabriel responded calmly. And yes, I am listening to her. Just as I'm finally listening to my mother, who has been trying to show me for months who you really are, Lauren. The silence that followed was so dense that it seemed to have its own substance. Lauren adjusted her posture, crossing her arms defensively. I don't know what this girl or your mother have been saying, Gabriel, but they're clearly trying to defame me. I've been here for almost a year, taking care of this house, supporting you in every decision, planning our future together, and you're going to let a street child and an elderly lady with cognitive problems accuse me this way? My mother doesn't have cognitive problems, Lauren, Gabriel replied, his voice becoming icy. And if you're so concerned about being defamed, perhaps you should be more careful about what you say behind my back. Lauren took a step forward, her mask of control beginning to crack. What are you talking about? About your conversation with me this morning. About more suitable care options for my mother after the wedding. About how that would make our life easier. Gabriel quoted Lauren's exact words, observing their effect. Little Star heard everything. And before you accuse her of making this up, know that I remember that part of our discussion perfectly. Lauren's face transformed, shifting from false outrage to calculated coldness in seconds. It was like watching one mask being replaced by another. You're distorting my words, Gabriel, she said, her voice now dangerously calm. I merely suggested options that could provide a better quality of life for Martha. It's natural for us to plan our future, considering all the variables. Your mother isn't getting any younger, and her condition requires specialized care. Care that she receives perfectly well here, in her home, surrounded by the family that loves her, Gabriel retorted. Or at least she should receive. Little Star, who was observing the confrontation with attentive eyes, suddenly spoke again. You told Rita that soon you wouldn't have to put up with the controlling old woman in a wheelchair. Her voice was small, but the words were clear and precise, as if she had memorized every syllable. Lauren stared at the girl with a look that could freeze hell. How dare you? A street brat, blatantly lying about me. Little Star doesn't lie, came a new voice from the office door. Martha had arrived silently in her wheelchair, Rita right behind her. And she's not the only one who heard your malicious comments, Lauren. Rita has also witnessed many of them. The housekeeper, normally discreet and reserved, took a step forward. It's true, Mr. Gabriel, Mrs. Lauren has been cruel to your mother when you're not present, and to the girl as well. Lauren looked around, feeling cornered. Her beautiful face contorted into an expression that revealed her true nature, cold, calculating, furious at having been unmasked. This is ridiculous. An absurd conspiracy against me, led by a resentful old woman who doesn't want to lose control over her son, a maid who obviously fears being replaced, and a problematic child who shouldn't even be here. She turned to Gabriel, trying one last card. Gabriel, please. It's us against them. Our life, our future. Will you let them destroy everything we've built because of these intrigues? Gabriel looked at Lauren as if seeing her for the first time. How could he have been so blind? The signs had always been there. The barely disguised impatience with his mother, the obsession with status and appearances, the coldness that occasionally escaped from the perfectly constructed facade. His relationship with her had always been more a matter of mutual convenience than true love, but he had allowed himself to ignore this, focusing on his work and the practical advantages of the partnership. Little Star's unexpected arrival had been the catalyst that exposed all the cracks in his seemingly perfect life. There is no us against them. Lauren, he finally said, his voice firm and decisive. There is only the truth coming to light. And the truth is that you are not the person you pretended to be all this time. Lauren stiffened, realizing she had lost control of the situation. You'll regret this, Gabriel, she said softly, all pretense of innocence disappearing from her face. You think you can simply discard me. After everything I've invested in this relationship. Invested? Gabriel repeated, the word revealing so much. Is that how you see our engagement? As an investment? Don't be naive, Lauren smiled without humor. All relationships are investments. I offered you social connections, an impeccable public image, the promise of an elite family. In return, I expected financial security and social position. A perfectly reasonable arrangement, but not based on love, Martha commented softly, or respect. Lauren gave her an icy look. Love? A romantic and outdated notion. Respect is earned, Martha. And frankly, you lost mine when you chose to victimize yourself instead of adapting to your new limitation. The insult hit Gabriel like a slap. Enough, Lauren. I want you to leave my house now. Kicking me out in the middle of the night? How chivalrous, she laughed bitterly. And our engagement? The wedding? All the people who have already been invited? It's over, Gabriel declared simply. Tomorrow we'll formalize the cancellation of everything. As for tonight, you can stay in the ground floor guest room. By morning I expect you to have packed your bags. Lauren looked at each face in the room, Gabriel determined, Martha serene, Rita relieved, and Little Star, with those perceptive eyes that seemed to see through souls. For a moment, her mask fell completely, revealing a raw fury that deformed her elegant features. You'll regret this, she hissed. Especially you, little meddler. Her gaze fixed on Little Star, who surprisingly didn't back down. Don't threaten the child. Lauren, Gabriel warned, his voice carrying a tone that no one in the room had heard before. And don't try anything against my family. You wouldn't like the consequences. Understanding that she had definitely lost, Lauren straightened her shoulders, composing herself with visible effort. Don't worry, Gabriel. Tomorrow I'll be out of this madhouse you call home. I hope you're very happy with your controlling mother and your new orphan pupil. With that, she spun on her heels and left, her steps echoing heavily down the corridor. The silence that followed was finally broken by Little Star, who looked at Gabriel with a mixture of relief and uncertainty. She, gone, really? Gabriel knelt in front of her, placing his hands gently on her small shoulders. Yes, Little Star, really, and you can rest easy, and we won't let her or anyone else hurt you again. It was then that something extraordinary happened. The girl's face, normally so controlled and cautious, opened into a smile so radiant, so full of hope and relief, that it illuminated the entire room. And then, to everyone's surprise, she threw her little arms around Gabriel's neck, hugging him with all the strength her small body possessed. Thank you, she whispered in his ear, a simple word loaded with emotion. Martha observed the scene with tears in her eyes, her heart overflowing with gratitude for this moment that seemed like a miracle. her son finally freed from a toxic relationship, and this small child finally beginning to believe that there could be safety and love in the world. What will we do now? Rita asked softly, approaching Martha's chair. The lady smiled serenely. Now, dear Rita, we will finally begin to be a real family. That night, as the storm finally broke over Portland, washing the city with its purifying fury, the inhabitants of the Wilson mansion slept deeply for the first time in a long time, free from the weight of secrets and masks, united by bonds that, although new, promised to be stronger and truer than any they had ever known. 3 months had passed since the stormy night when Lauren had left the Wilson mansion, taking with her only her designer suitcases and a bitter resentment that, fortunately, had manifested only in some malicious comments spread throughout Portland society, nothing that Gabriel's solid reputation couldn't withstand. The cancellation of the wedding had generated whispers, of course, but they were soon forgotten when a much juicier political scandal took the local headlines. The mansion, once a place of cold beauty and tense silences, had subtly transformed. The heavy curtains that Lauren had insisted on keeping closed now remained open, allowing the sun of late spring to flood the rooms. Vases with fresh flowers, many picked by Little Star in the garden, decorated the tables. Sounds of childish laughter frequently echoed through the corridors, something unthinkable months before. On that sunny Saturday morning, Gabriel was having his coffee on the back porch, observing his mother and Little Star in the garden. Martha, whose health had improved considerably in recent months, supervised while the girl planted daisy seedlings in a section recently prepared for her. "Not too deep, dear," Martha gently instructed. "The roots need space to breathe and expand." Little Star nodded in concentration, her small hands working with meticulous care. She was almost unrecognizable compared to the frightened child who had arrived on a stormy night. Her face had gained color. Her hair, once dull, now shone, and her body, although still delicate, no longer appeared extremely fragile. More notable, however, was the transformation in her behavior. The girl who barely spoke now conversed animatedly, asked questions, shared observations. Her eyes, once permanently vigilant, now frequently lit up with curiosity and joy. There were still moments, of course, occasional nightmares, startles at loud noises, hesitations around strangers, but they were increasingly rare. The legal process to regularize Little Star's situation had been complex, but was advancing at a steady pace. Dr. Andrews had obtained a court order for temporary guardianship after proving the serious irregularities at the shelter from which she had fled, which, in fact, had been closed by the authorities after a thorough investigation revealed systematic cases of neglect and abuse. The director now faced criminal charges, along with other involved staff. The discovery that Little Star, or Cecilia Oliveira, her official name, was effectively an orphan with no known relatives, had paved the way for Gabriel to initiate the adoption process. It would be a long journey, he knew, with psychological evaluations, social worker visits, and much bureaucracy, but he was determined to transform that temporary guardianship into a permanent home. "Mr. Gabriel," Rita's voice interrupted his thoughts. "Ms. Helen has just arrived." Gabriel smiled, placing his cup on the table. "Thank you, Rita. Ask her to come out here, please." Minutes later, Helen Ferguson was crossing the garden toward the porch. Tall, with curly hair tied in an unpretentious bun and expressive brown eyes, Helen was the antithesis of Lauren, simple, direct, genuinely warm. As the social worker assigned to Little Star's case, she had been visiting the mansion weekly for almost 2 months, monitoring the child's progress and evaluating the family environment. "Good morning." "Gabriel," she greeted with her characteristic smile, the one that seemed to illuminate her entire face. "Perfect day for gardening, I see." "Good morning, Helen. It really is beautiful. Would you like some coffee?" As Gabriel served a cup for the visitor, Little Star spotted Helen in the garden and immediately dropped her gardening tools, running in her direction with an excitement that would have been unthinkable weeks ago. "Helen, come see my flowers." "I planted daisies, and Martha said they'll soon grow big and beautiful." Helen crouched to receive the girl's enthusiastic hug, her simple clothes, jeans, t-shirt, and casual blazer, slightly staining with dirt from Little Star's hands, something she clearly didn't mind. I can see. What wonderful work. You're becoming a real gardener. Martha approached in her wheelchair, smiling at the interaction. Good morning, Helen, as always punctual. Good morning, Martha. You look great today. Is this new treatment working? Wonderfully well. The doctor was impressed with my progress at the last appointment. Martha cast an affectionate look at little Star. I have an excellent reason to improve, don't I? Helen's visits had become an anticipated moment for everyone in the house. Beyond her professional role, the social worker had genuinely won the family's sympathy with her sincere and caring approach. For little Star especially, Helen represented a young and affectionate female figure, something the girl clearly needed in her life. For Gabriel, Helen's weekly presence brought a pleasant anticipation that he hadn't felt in a long time. There was something extraordinarily refreshing about her authenticity, the way she laughed openly, how she expressed her opinions without calculations, how she genuinely cared about her work and the people she helped. After breakfast shared in the garden, Helen conducted her formal assessment, first speaking privately with little Star, then with Martha, and finally with Gabriel in his office. She's progressing incredibly well, Helen commented, consulting her notes. The therapy twice a week is being fundamental, but the safe family environment is what's really making the difference. Little Star, or Cecilia, although she clearly prefers the nickname, shows all the signs of a child who is finally beginning to overcome deep traumas. Is that good news for the adoption process? Gabriel asked, unable to disguise his anxiety. Helen smiled. Definitely. The report I'll send this week will be extremely positive. Of course, we still have a road ahead, but I'm increasingly confident that the outcome will be favorable. Gabriel let out a sigh of relief. I can't imagine this house without her now. It's as if she was always meant to be here, you know? I understand perfectly. Helen closed her folder, her gaze softening. Some people enter our lives exactly when we need them most, even if we don't know we need them. There was something in the way she said this, something in the way her eyes met his, that made Gabriel's heart speed up slightly. In recent months, between the official visits and some social occasions, such as when Helen accepted the invitation to Martha's birthday, they had developed a friendship that, Gabriel now realized, carried the potential for something more. Helen, he began, hesitant like a teenager, I was thinking, next week there will be an astronomy exhibition at the Portland Art Museum. Little Star is very excited to go, and I thought that maybe you would like to join us, not as a social worker, but as a family friend. Helen's smile brightened and a slight blush colored her cheeks. I would love to, Gabriel. Astronomy was my secret passion as a child. I never told little Star, but I have a telescope stored in my apartment for years. Really, she'll be delighted to know that. Gabriel felt a wave of warmth spread through his chest. Perhaps we could use it someday on a clear sky night. It's a date then, Helen replied, and immediately blushed even more as she realized the possible interpretation of her words. I mean an appointment. A family program. A date sounds perfect to me, Gabriel replied softly, surprising both of them with his boldness. The moment was interrupted by an animated knock on the door, followed by little Star's enthusiastic entrance. Gabriel! Helen! Look what Martha gave me! In her small hands, she proudly held an illustrated mythology book, open to a page about constellations. They're stories about the stars. Can we read together later? Of course, little Star. Gabriel smiled, exchanging a knowing look with Helen. Actually, I have a surprise for you. Guess who has a telescope and will join us at the Astronomy Museum next week? The girl's eyes widened, passing from Gabriel to Helen with wondering disbelief. You have a real telescope? That lets you see the stars up close. Helen laughed, enchanted with the genuine enthusiasm. I do. It was my father's, and he taught me how to use it when I was about your age. If you want, I can bring it someday so we can observe the sky together. Yes, yes, yes. Little Star jumped with joy, impulsively hugging first Helen and then Gabriel. We'll see all the constellations. Orion, Ursa Major, Cassiopeia. As the girl animatedly listed all the constellations she had learned, Gabriel and Helen exchanged smiles that carried silent promises of many starry nights shared in the future. 2 weeks later, in the spacious back garden of the Wilson mansion, an unusual scene was unfolding. A small table had been installed under the trees, covered with a white tablecloth, and decorated with colorful lanterns that emitted a soft light in the growing darkness of twilight. Around it, comfortable chairs accommodated a heterogeneous group. Gabriel, Helen, Martha in her adapted wheelchair, Rita and her husband Anthony, Dr. Andrews and even Dr. Stephen, the physiotherapist who was working with Martha. At the center of attention, however, was little Star, dressed in a sky-blue dress sprinkled with small silver stars, a gift from Helen for the occasion. The girl carried a folder decorated with planet stickers, and her face displayed a mixture of nervousness and excitement. "Attention, please," Gabriel announced, raising his glass of juice. "We are all gathered here today for a very special event, the first official presentation by the youngest and most talented astronomer in Portland, possibly in the entire United States." Enthusiastic applause echoed through the garden, making little Star blush with pleasure. "Without further ado," Gabriel continued, "I pass the word to our star expert, our very own little Star." The girl took a deep breath, looking at the smiling faces around her. 3 months ago, the idea of speaking in front of so many people would have been unthinkable, but now surrounded by people who genuinely cared about her, she found the necessary courage. "Good evening," she began, her voice small but clear. "Thank you for coming to my first lecture on astronomy. Today I will talk about constellations and their stories." With Helen's help, little Star had prepared illustrated posters showing the main constellations visible in the sky of the Northern Hemisphere. As she explained each one of them, her confidence grew, her voice became firmer, and her enthusiasm infected all those present. Martha watched with misty eyes, hardly believing the transformation of the frightened and silent girl she had found on the porch during a storm. Gabriel, in turn, felt himself overflowing with a pride he had never imagined possible, not only for little Star's incredible recovery, but also for the role his family had played in it. Beside him, Helen watched the presentation with genuine admiration. In the last 2 months, her relationship with the Wilson family had evolved from professional to deeply personal. Her visits, previously strictly weekly and formal, now occurred on various days, often extending to dinners, weekend outings, and recently, some private moments with Gabriel that confirmed what both already suspected. There was something special growing between them. "And this is the constellation of Orion," little Star continued, pointing to her carefully colored drawing. "The ancient Greeks believed it was a giant hunter. See, these 3 aligned stars form Orion's belt." She paused, smiling shyly. "Martha says that some people are like constellations in our lives, points of light that, when connected, form something beautiful and meaningful." Gabriel felt Helen's hand seek his under the table, their fingers naturally intertwining. They exchanged a look loaded with emotion, not only for the touching metaphor of the girl, but for the silent recognition that they themselves were forming their own constellation, connected by a child who had entered their lives in the most unexpected way possible. When the presentation ended, with little Star explaining how to use the North Star to orient oneself in the Northern Hemisphere, but here in Portland, we use the Big Dipper. A round of enthusiastic applause filled the garden. The girl made a small bow, her face illuminated by a pure and genuine happiness. The rest of the evening proceeded in a quiet celebration. While the adults conversed, little Star had convinced Helen to set up the telescope she had brought in her trunk. The two were now installed in a more secluded corner of the garden. So, observing the first stars that appeared in the darkening sky, Gabriel approached his mother, who was watching the scene with a serene expression. "Happy, Mom?" he asked, crouching beside the wheelchair. "More than I imagined possible again, son." Martha covered his hand with hers. "Seeing this child flourish, seeing you finally find someone who values you for the man you are, not for what you possess. It's as if life had given us all a second chance." Gabriel nodded, feeling a knot of emotion in his throat. "You know what impresses me most? How it all started with a storm. If it weren't for that rainy night, if little Star hadn't chosen our porch to shelter, there are more things in heaven and earth than are dreamt of in our philosophy. As Shakespeare would say," Martha smiled, "some things are simply written in the stars, son." A week later, Gabriel faced his reflection in the mirror, adjusting his tie for the 3rd time as it refused to sit perfectly straight. He was more nervous than he remembered being in years, not the tense and unpleasant nervousness he had felt in the final months of his relationship with Lauren, but a good, expectant anxiety, mixed with a deep joy. "Let me help," Little Star's small voice sounded behind him. She entered the room wearing an elegant light pink dress, her hair tied in a simple but charming hairstyle, the work of Rita's skillful hands. "Helen taught me how." Gabriel smiled, kneeling so the little one could reach his tie. With the seriousness of someone performing a task of the utmost importance, Little Star adjusted the knot, her tongue appearing at the corner of her mouth in concentration. "There. Now you look handsome for the special dinner." "Thank you, Princess." Gabriel kissed her forehead affectionately. "You look beautiful too. Do you think Helen will like the restaurant I chose?" Little Star rolled her eyes with a comic expression of exasperation. "Helen likes you, not the restaurant, silly. But yes, she will like it. She told me she's never eaten in a restaurant in the trees before." The treetop restaurant, installed among the canopies of centuries-old trees in an ecological park on the outskirts of Portland, was famous not only for its refined cuisine, but mainly for its unique location, elegant platforms connected by suspended walkways, offering a spectacular view of the surrounding nature. Gabriel had reserved the entire space for that special night, something that the manager, knowing the Wilson family for years, had accommodated with impeccable discretion. "Are you sure you don't want to come with us?" Gabriel asked for the umpteenth time, already knowing what the answer would be. "No, no, no." Little Star shook her head emphatically. "It's a night for you two. Martha and I are going to watch Moana and eat popcorn. It's all arranged." Gabriel smiled, amazed at the emotional maturity that this 10-year-old child demonstrated. From the beginning, Little Star had perceived the special connection between him and Helen, and far from feeling jealousy or insecurity, she seemed genuinely happy with the prospect of seeing them together. "Besides," she added with a mischievous little smile, "Rita said you're going to ask Helen to be your girlfriend tonight. Is that true?" Gabriel choked slightly. "Rita said that, did she? Well, I guess I can't hide anything in this house." "She'll say yes," Little Star declared with the absolute certainty that only children possess. "She looks at you like in the love stories that Martha tells me." 2 hours later, seated across from Helen at a private platform decorated with soft lights and wildflowers, Gabriel reflected on Little Star's words. Helen was stunning in a simple but elegant emerald green dress, her curls loose framing her face illuminated by candlelight. More beautiful than her appearance, however, was the way her eyes shone as she talked about her dreams, her plans, her hopes for the future. "And after 5 years working directly with children in vulnerable situations, I realized I needed to do more," she explained, gesturing animatedly. "That's why I decided to return to university for a master's in public policy for children and adolescents. I want to change the system from within, you know? It's not enough to treat the symptoms. We need to attack the causes." Gabriel watched, her completely captivated not only by her words, but by the genuine passion with which she spoke them. What a contrast to dinners with Lauren, dominated by social gossip, veiled criticism, and plans to climb even higher on the ladder of Portland high society. "You're extraordinary, Helen," he said simply, interrupting the flow of her words. "Did you know that?" She blushed, a shy smile curving her lips. "Why? Because I talk too much about work during a romantic dinner?" "Because you truly care. About your work, about the children you help, about the world around you." Gabriel extended his hand across the table, taking hers. "You've transformed not only Little Star's life, but mine too. Ours." Helen intertwined her fingers with his, her gaze softening. "You've transformed mine too, Gabriel. Observing what you, Martha, and your entire household have done for that girl has restored my faith in people's potential for good." Words flowed between them with an ease that Gabriel had never experienced before, without calculations, without hidden agendas, just two people sharing truths, dreams, and genuine feelings. When dessert was served, a spectacular creation inspired by a galaxy, with dark chocolate, red berries, and details in gold leaf, Gabriel knew it was the moment. "Helen," he began, his heart racing, "in these last few months, you've entered our lives like, well, as Little Star would say, like a new star in our constellation. Brilliant, vital, transformative." She watched him with shining eyes, a growing emotion visible on her face. What began as a professional relationship evolved into something I never imagined finding again a true connection based on shared values, mutual respect, and—" He paused, gathering courage. "And love. A love that grows naturally, without pressures or expectations, just with the certainty that being with you makes each moment more meaningful." Gabriel took from his pocket a small box, opening it to reveal not a ring, but a delicate star-shaped pendant, similar to the one little star carried, but in white gold studded with small diamonds. "I'm not asking for your hand in marriage, Helen, not yet. I know it's early, that we're still getting to know each other, that there's much to build. But I would like to formally ask, would you be my girlfriend? Part of our family constellation, not just as Little Star's social worker, but as the woman who is rapidly becoming essential to my happiness." Helen looked alternately at the pendant and at Gabriel's face, unshed tears shining in her eyes. For a terrifying moment, he feared he had gone too far, had misinterpreted the signs, had pressured something still so new. Then she smiled, that radiant smile that illuminated her entire face, and extended her hand to touch his. "Yes, Gabriel. Yes to being your girlfriend. Yes to being part of your constellation. Yes to building something together, at the pace that's right for all of us." Gabriel felt a wave of relief and pure happiness invade him. With slightly trembling fingers, he placed the pendant around Helen's neck, who touched it reverently. "It's beautiful, and the symbolism is perfect." She laughed softly. "Little Star will love the coincidence." "Actually," Gabriel confessed, "it was her idea. She said that this way we would all be connected, even when we were apart, each with our star, but part of the same constellation." Helen couldn't contain her tears at this revelation. "That girl, she's amazing, isn't she? After everything she's been through, she still has so much wisdom, so much capacity to love." "Exactly like you," Gabriel replied, leaning in to seal that promise with a soft kiss, full of promises for the future. When they returned to the mansion late at night, they were greeted by a curiously awake Little Star, who awaited them in the entrance hall in her pajamas printed with moons and stars, her eyes shining with expectation. "So," she asked, practically jumping with anxiety, "did she like the gift? Are you boyfriend and girlfriend now?" Helen showed the pendant with a radiant smile. "I loved the gift, and yes, we are officially boyfriend and girlfriend now. It seems it was your idea?" "The pendant, yes. The dating was Gabriel's." Little Star ran to hug them, first Helen, then Gabriel, and finally both together, her little arms barely managing to encompass them. "Now we're a real family." "Almost," Gabriel gently corrected. "We still have a long way ahead. The adoption process, the development of our relationship." "Details," Little Star dismissed with an imperial gesture that drew laughter from both. "The important thing is that we're all together and that no one will separate us." That night, long after Little Star finally fell asleep, not without first making Helen promise that she would come for breakfast the next day, Gabriel found himself in the library with his mother, who awaited him with 2 glasses of red wine. "By your expression, I assume everything went well," Martha commented with a knowing smile, raising her glass in a silent toast. Gabriel nodded, sitting in the armchair next to his mother. "Better than I could have imagined. Helen is different from anyone I've ever met, Mom. It's as if I finally understand what you and Dad had. A love based on true partnership, mutual respect and shared values," Martha completed softly. "Your father would be proud, Gabriel. Not only because of Helen, but for everything you've done for Little Star. For us." They remained in silence for a few moments, contemplating the fire crackling in the fireplace, each lost in their own thoughts. "You know," Martha finally spoke, her voice loaded with contained emotion, "when that little girl appeared on our porch, soaked and frightened, I could never have imagined how she would change our lives. It's almost as if she were an angel, sent to save us from ourselves." Gabriel smiled, remembering Little Star's dirty and frightened face that first night, and comparing it with the confident and loving child who now slept under his roof. "I don't know if she saved us or if we saved her, Mom. Maybe it's a bit of both. That's how it works with true families, Martha replied with quiet wisdom. It doesn't matter how we start, but how we choose to continue together, day after day, saving each other when necessary. Outside